Rigsters here, back with another Forza Horizon video. This time, I had a viewer suggest covering another interesting car that, though, is not as popular outside of the United States, but is something a little different or unusual. The 2000 Ford SVT Cobra R. In this video, I'm going to show you what I did tuning-wise to it to make it more controllable from its stock B-Class configuration to S1. So I'll do a quick parts showdown here. Under aero and appearance, I did not put anything on the front, but I did change the rear. The original spoiler, unfortunately, unlike in real life, this is what the original spoiler looks like. It does not actually produce downforce in this game. This actually does produce downforce, and actually is one of the many very critical tuning things I did to make this car more stable. Moving to the tires. The tires I equipped is semi-slick race compound. The reason why I always prefer semi-slick over the slick race tire compound is because it allows me to drive on wet roads with more confidence, because there are grooves, which are kind of hard to see over here. But if you look closely, this is the slick race tire compound. This is the semi-slick race tire compound. It provides just enough grip for the power add-ons I did as well. Next thing I did, of course, is the obvious: maximum front tire width, maximum rear tire width, track width rear to maximum, front track width to maximum. So that is it for the tires. Of course, I also modified the transmission. Put race clutch, race transmission. Now, interesting thing about the real life Ford SVT Cobra R is that it did have a 6-speed transmission that was a manual. Fortunately, in this game, you can replicate that and just allow you to tweak the individual gears with this setup. And then the race driveline and race differential. Now we go to platform and handling. Race brakes, because I always prefer putting the best brakes you can in most racing games, that if it actually matters. Unlike in Most Wanted from 2005, brakes in Forza Horizon series always mattered. So it's always a good idea to put the best brakes you can afford or can do for your build. Springs and dampeners, of course, is set to race. Maximum front roll bar, maximum rear roll bar, maximum weight reduction. It originally started with, albeit the engine weight reduction mods, at 3,431 pounds to, with the race weight reduction, 2,751 pounds. That is also accounting for having the engine power mods I put on this car as well. Lastly, the engine, race intake manifold, and as you see in the pattern here, maximum race fuel system, race ignition, race exhaust, race cams and valves, race valves, maximum engine block, which is race engine block, race pistons, and lastly the race flywheel, which reduces your weight by 14 pounds. So those are the parts I put in for the 2000 Ford SVT Cobra R. Now for custom tuning, the tires, I did 32.5 for the front and rear. I did do some off-camera tunings and adjustments, so this should be more set up for more controllable understeer. It tended to oversteer quite frequently before I did some modifications. 328 final drive gears, so you actually have a little bit of usable top speed. It is on the slow side top speed wise with the stock engine and no additional forced induction to increase the horsepower, but it will grip really well. And these are the perspective gear ratios I put through gear 1 through 6 for preferences. You can modify this to be faster acceleration wise, or for a little more top speed, you can play around with these settings. Alignment, I did monkey around with quite a lot, particularly in the camber toe you rarely want to mess with one exception, which is the Koenigsegg Agera video. Casters kept to stock. Roll bars, with the discovery and thanks to a viewer suggesting this for the Ford GT video, increasing the roll bar stiffness to a certain degree actually also helps front-engine rear-wheel drive cars such as the Ford Mustang. There are many other front-engine rear-wheel drive cars in this game. This happens just to be one of them. I did not monkey with the springs. I kept those stuck. Dampening, the only thing I changed here was increase the rebound stiffness by 0.1 and prospectively for the front as well. Bump stiffness I have not touched yet, but that may be what I will do before I hit the track. Aero, I slightly decreased the downforce from 390 to 388 for the rear wing. If you put the front and rear wing in, it kind of makes it really weird to balance. So just having the rear wing usually is the safer bet when you do this kind of stuff. Brakes I kept stock for the tuning. Differentials, I did something unusual for this one. I found, at least for some front engine rear wheel drive cars of this type, it actually is sometimes better, not always, to increase the acceleration and deceleration from, say, 25-30%, which is started from acceleration and liftoff or deceleration, to about the same percentage at a higher rate. I found so far 84% being suited for more of my driving style. This may not work for your driving style, but that is something I have found that helps me drive the car better. And one last note here is I will experiment with putting the bump stiffness to be a smidge softer. Like instead of 7.7, for example, I'll do like 6.5. Before I change that though, I'm going to press Setup Manager and save this setup right here to S1 Street V1 Proto. I can't put the word Proto, so I'll just put S1 Street V1. And before I head out to do the test track, I am going to reduce this front bump stiffness to 6.5, and the rear I'm going to reduce to 6, and apply those changes. So I'll see you at the test track. Alright, so I am at the street marathon. So outside of the bump stiffness that I showed prior to getting to this teleportation point, I think overall, outside of that adjustment, this should be pretty much all set for now. So let's get started. As per usual, the reason why I race against bots and on this track is it tests handling, tests top speed, and a lot of bumps. And also bots are kind of fun to beat when you know the course pretty well. So this is a very fair assessment. So far, noticing reducing the bump stiffness did increase the oversteer potential, but it seems like it actually is handling a little bit better because it's not trying to oversteer at high speeds. Now, the question remains what this will act and respond like at lower speeds, because that was usually the problem with this car. It has plenty of grip, at least in the drive course, because I always tested the drive, but I do these kind of tunes. Partly because, well, I'm trying to give it the best grip scenario, so if I know it will grip there as I hit a civilian car for no reason, it allows for consistent testing is really the main key. Then once I know it can do that consistently, most of the time it's not going to change too much, but it'll change a little bit under slippier conditions. Now I did notice that the understeer might be a little bit too much at some of these slower turns. but it definitely feels a little more stable. It's more oriented towards grip. So much so that I bonk into stuff. Now, the only thing I can't control, of course, obviously, is the traffic. Because it turns on traffic, so it adds for an extra challenge. And interesting stuff to blab about. Because why not? Creative content. So, the car itself. The 2000 Ford Mustang SVT Cobra R. What is this car about? Well, this was a high-end, definitely tuned more for race or racetrack configuration Mustang. So much so that I hit the corn. Oops, did I reset the car? Well, of course I did, because I made a mistake. I have to reset the car anyways. So, basically, the Ford Mustang SVT Cobra R was one of the last Fox body generation SVT Cobra Rs. SVT stood for Special Vehicle Team, which basically was kind of like a Mercedes AMG or BMW's famous M division. It was basically Ford's counter to that, those particular sub-brands that were made more for like going fast around a racetrack or just making ridiculous amounts of power and cornering really well. Was kind of more what they wanted to do tuning-wise for a lot of their products. Not all of them, but a vast majority of them. The kind of funny part about this particular Mustang generation is because it was actually still based on the Fox body but modernized, it has kind of like a funky 90s look to it. So if you were to look at this car more closely to the 90s version, you can notice a lot of similarities, but softening of the bumper as well. It's like aesthetically, it looks different enough, but you can still tell, like, yeah, that's a Mustang. It may not be the best looking Mustang, but it's still a Mustang. I always had a soft spot for the Fox 4, or the modernized Fox body Mustangs in particular. They are my third favorite generation, followed by, of course, the current modern Mustang, and above the current modern Mustang, at the time of this film in 2022, the 1960s to 71 generation. That'll always, of course, be in most people's mind, and in my opinion, one of the best. In terms of not just looks, but for what they did at the time, given the technology. And of course, that is subjective and up for debates and also opinion. There are some people that think certain generation of Mustangs are better than others, and that's what makes car culture great. There's many things you can pick from in the car world that you can like or dislike. That's for sure. As for the driving in this game, I may stiffen the rebound on the dampener a little bit because I'm noticing it's starting to understeer a little bit too often at higher speeds. And also, because this car is at S1, you do a lot of high speed races, whereas you're doing like top speed runs, this is not the build for you. Or at least this type of build for this car. Because it has a very low top speed for S1. 180 is very competitive in S1. Great in A, but not great in S1. Grip is great though. When you tune that right, you can grip pretty well. So it's good at the medium to low speed turns. That was also a driver incompetence error. It's always harder to drive when you're clapping. In a video game at least. Luckily in real life it's not as dangerous. Well, I'm gonna just say not as dangerous. It's kind of like, you know, you don't have to look at your controller and stuff, you know what a wheel is, you know? That kind of thing. I always like these random cars that the AI picks based on your performance index as well. This one in particular, I believe, is a very heavily souped up Mazda RX-8. Yes, it is, as I almost missed the check. Oh yeah, you know, just driving around, doing this thing. Also, this particular engine, which is the one it came with, albeit with some modifications, of course, is a 5.4 liter V8. It was not the more common 4 liter V8 series. It was a taller engine block design that they used for this particular car, which is kind of not as well known fact, but it is something to note because they didn't use that engine for a lot of their products back then. It's more unique to this particular Mustang, but it was built originally, of course. And back then, this Ford Mustang in late 90s, early 2000s costed between $40,000 to $50,000, which was pretty expensive. I mean, you were paying for a very limited Mustang back then. And unlike in the game, which I souped up, of course, in real life, due to drag, it would only go a top speed of 175. Which, for back then, in the context it was competing against, was pretty competitive. It's nowadays kind of stock in that aspect, but it's a very special and unique Mustang, at the very least. Certainly can grip, that's for sure. Now let's hear that chorus V8 open up here. And a V8, you know, this sounds so nice even on this chintzy looking interior. It brings back the 90s and early 2000s vibes. So, finished third, which is fine. I usually finish in the top 3 of this build for this particular course. So, I'm probably going to change the dampening before I wrap up this video. Oh. Mazda RX-7, huh? Okay. I already have this car, but you know what? I'm gonna send it as a gift because people need to know the magic of a rotary car. So I'll send it as a gift. Send it to anybody and hit enjoy. My gamer tag, of course. There we go. Oh, and it leveled up. So, before I wrap this up here, let's go to the tuned car. Make the dampening 0.2 better to 6.7 on the front bump stiffness and 0.3 better on the rear bump stiffness. Go to setup manager and hit apply and save setup and name this S1 Street V2. And that's pretty much it for the 2000 Ford Mustang SVT Cobra R. I do run a Ko-Fi page if you want to support the channel. Still have the goal of getting that fight stick, and hope this tune and build helps you out for this particular car for the request, or for anybody in general that wants to try to do a tuned grip build for S1 configuration. The important thing to note about this is if you do it without forced induction, do keep in mind that it will not be very competitive on the higher speed tracks. But on lower ones, like the one I just did, it can keep pace for the most part. Just mind the traction loss on certain cornering. Just like with any rear-wheel drive front-engine cars. So, this is Rigsters Journey, signing off.